In this video, I want to look at one of the most complicated financial decisions that a consumer is likely to face, and that is whether they should buy or lease a new car. And I want to try and explain why it doesn't have anything to do with whether you like to drive new cars or how long you think you're going to keep the car. It has only to do with your time preference for money. This is why we can use the tools of engineering business practices in order to analyze this decision problem. We're going to start by drawing cash flow diagrams, as we always start by drawing cash flow diagrams. So the first one is the one that's most familiar to people, and that's buy. When you buy, you have the choice of using cash or loan. Well, I suppose if you have good credit. For a new car, it might be hard to buy a new car without good credit, but we know that there's lots of people out there who advertise that credit's not a problem. They'll sell you the car at any price. So we'll assume that buyers have the choice of either paying cash or using a loan. First thing we'll do is we'll look at the cash alternative. Not to scale here, but if you're going to pay cash, you've got to have a lot of money. You have to be able to pay the price of the car right now. But in addition, you have to be able to pay these transaction fees. Mostly these transaction fees are taxes. They could be sales taxes, use taxes, excise taxes. In this case, just for the sake of argument, we'll call them sales taxes, but different municipalities, different states use different terms. So here's our cash flow diagram if we're using cash to buy the car. But the car doesn't last forever. In this case, we're going to truncate our analysis after 48 months. This is 4 years. Now, I'll show you later how we can continue it after 4 years if we want. But for right now, we want to finish this. We bought the car with cash. We want to understand what our options are when, at the end of 4 years, we might be considering buying a new car. When we purchase the car, we have an asset. We can choose to sell that asset in the future. So here's a future value. We don't know what the used car market is going to be like. We don't know what the shape of the car is going to be. So we don't know what this future value is, but we know that it exists. So now we have, if we're using cash, the two relevant aspects of that cash flow diagram. If we want to get to a net present value, then we're going to have to add the revenues that come in the future and subtract the costs. Really, this is going to wind up being a net present cost, of course, because cars are not going to be worth more in the future unless inflation goes crazy. We're not expecting that cars are going to be worth more in the future than they are at present. Because the price and the taxes are already at time equals zero, we don't have to make any adjustments here. But in order to move this future value back to present value, we need to understand a discount rate. Now, you know that discount rates are not exactly the same as interest rates. They're analogous, but interest is the cost of using someone else's money, the rent you pay for money. Discount rate is simply a subjective expression of your time preference. Most of us would rather have money now than money in the future. And so money in the future is not worth as much to us now. In order to take a future value and discount it to understand what its present value is, we need to know this discount rate. And in this formula, a discount rate, R, is expressed in the same units as an interest rate, I. Then, of course, we have to raise this to an exponent, n, which would represent the number of compounding periods. So the future value f divided by 1 plus the discount rate raised to the n power, this is going to give us the present value of whatever we're able to sell the car for after 48 months. We then would, to get the net present value for the cash option, we would say it's f minus p minus t. Sorry, this is f adjusted, so that's PV. This is the discounted f minus p minus t. This is the simplest situation for us. The question is, what should the discount rate be? Well, for a lot of people, the discount rate is determined from the opportunity cost of money. So if you took this money here, instead of buying a car, you were to put it in the bank, what could your return be? Those returns, at least risk-free returns, are very low right now. But for a lot of people, the opportunity cost is not the interest that they could earn on saving the money, it's the interest they could avoid paying, say, on a credit card. So we might have a discount rate of, say, 9%, or I have a credit card right now at 14%. Some people have a credit cards at 22%. What we're saying is that if you didn't use this money to purchase the car, what would you use the money for? And if you would use the money to pay off one of these high interest loans, then that can be your discount rate. You plug that right in here. Now we understand how to do the net present value of the cash option. Most people don't pay for a car in cash. Most people don't want to come up with all of this money all at once. What they'd rather do, and here I'm going to use a different pen, what they'd rather do is finance the car. Now let's say this is a sort of a no money down loan that we often see advertised at dealerships, the kind of sign and drive type loan. And what they're going to do there is not only do you get to finance P, you also get to finance this big sales tax that you would owe. So we're going to add these two things together and we're going to wrap them up into payments that we'll call A. The question is, how do we compute A given P and T? Fortunately, we have a formula from a previous video. Here are the present costs, the price of the car plus the transaction costs. And now we can call it an interest rate. It's not a discount rate because there really is a loan here. You're buying the car with someone else's money, and so you need to pay rent to them for the money that you're using. So this I is a monthly interest rate. Usually loans are quoted on the basis of an annual interest rate. Let's say it's 6%. So we'd take the 6%, we would divide that by 12 months. I equals 6 over 12, so that would be 0.5% per month, and that's what we'll go on in here. N, the number of compounding periods, is going to be 48. Typically, although I suppose car dealerships also have financing deals that allow you to avoid this very first monthly payment. Typically, you pay your monthly payment for the first month, you pay that on the first day. So for the second month, you would pay that, again, ahead of time on the first day of the second month. And that means that your loan would be all paid off here on the first day of the 48th month. And you wouldn't have anything to pay at the end here, 48th. That kind of comes important when we make a comparison to leasing. So we've done the cash. Here we're using a loan to make these payments. We compute the monthly payments on this loan, and we still own the car. So we still have this future value. The question is, how do we get to the net present cost? And this is where it gets tricky. Remember here, we use the interest rate. The interest rate allows us to take the present costs, move them forward into a monthly payment. But when we go back to get a net present value, we're still using a discount rate. In order to go back, we're going A now to an NPV. We use the reciprocal of this formula. So here, NPV is going to equal A. And notice the change in the rate that becomes very important. Now it's 1 plus R to the N minus 1. And again, this R is monthly. So if we were going to take, say, 9%, and we plug it into this formula, 9%, that's per annum or per year, we'd have to divide 9 by 12 before we put it in here. And then we divide that by R, 1 plus R to the N. Now this is the present value of A discounted back. And you say, well, this seems ridiculous. We took the initial payments here, we move them forward, we amortize them into a monthly payment, and then we move them back to the present again. Why would we do that? Why don't we just say that the present value is what it is, the price of the car plus the transaction cost? That's because the interest rate that we get from a bank for a car, which is a collateralized loan, might be different than the discount rate. Remember, the discount rate might come from a credit card debt, or it might come from a savings opportunity. This is the interest rate on the car loan. This is our discount rate, which is our time preference of money generated from the opportunity cost. What would we do with the money if we weren't using it to pay the dealership? So this is going to be net present value. We only have one of the terms. This term is negative because that's what we pay, and of course we still have to have the PV. This is going to be F over 1 plus R to the N. So now we can compare whether we prefer, this is just in the buy option, whether we prefer to pay cash or whether we prefer to use a loan. We would compute the cash option using, again, here's PV from F. We would compare that to the loan option, and we would choose the one with the greatest net present value or the least net present cost. That doesn't say much about leasing. The leasing diagram is going to look a little bit different. Now, we're not buying anything. When we lease a car, this is a long-term rental arrangement. We have no future cash flow here because we don't own the asset. Typically, the advantage of leasing is that the monthly payments are lower. Again, they typically want you to make these payments at the beginning of each month. So here's month 47, you would make your last payment. Now, if these payments for A are, somewhere there might be $400, depending upon the car that you buy, you might be able to get into the same car. This is the big attraction for people of leasing, for somewhere around $250 or $300. So because the monthly payments are going to be lower on a lease, the lease looks like it's the better way to go. We're going to call these lease payments L. Typically, at the end of the lease, you have to pay what's called a disposition fee. Now, you have the option of purchasing the car at 48 months. If you do not purchase the car, then you might have to pay on the order of $300 in a disposition fee. And you say, well, what the heck is the disposition fee? Remember, you do not own this car. You have to return the car to the leasing company's agent. It's the leasing company that actually purchases the car from the dealer or from the manufacturer. You have to return the car to the leasing company's agent. Typically what happens to the car when the leasing company gets it back is they'll sell it at auction. They charge you a $300 disposition fee. You have the option of purchasing the car, but if you don't purchase the car, you have to return it to them and pay them $300 in order to take their own car back. That $300 represents their transaction costs at the end of the lease when they have to auction the car off to someone else. So here we have two complicated options, cash or loan. Now we know how to compare those two options and decide which is preferable for us. And you'll know now, because these formula are so similar, that it all depends upon whether we can get a better interest rate from the bank on the car than our discount rate. And the discount rate represented by how much could we earn if we use the money instead of buying the car, if we save the money, or if we used it to pay off a credit card or some other loan. So it's the difference between what the bank charges us and what we're charged or what we can get from other places. The math looks a little complicated, but the result is it's just a comparison of R and I. Here, the leasing situation is more complicated. In the next video, I'm going to look at this cash flow diagram in a little bit more detail because it has important tax implications. You don't pay the taxes up front on a lease. You only pay, I'm going to use small t for these taxes, you only pay taxes on each monthly payment. And this has the effect of spreading the taxes out. That turns out to be very important. I'll see you in the next video.